Yo, it's your boy Ancient Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew. We have our usual suspects of AD or Alpha Dean. We have Spiggs 18 or Anthony. And just as a quick reminder, if you haven't already, be sure to follow us here on Twitch or subscribe to us over on YouTube. It is a great help for our channels. And including that channel, we are also on the Anywhere door on Moonbeam, Monte Cook Games' new streaming platform where they're trying to collect all the content creators who produce like Cypher and Monte Cook Game stuff. So definitely check that out if you have not yet. It's going to be a booming place. But without further ado, one other thing. If you haven't already, be sure to check out CypherCon on the Discord, Cypher Unlimited Discord. We are currently accepting GM signups, so if you are looking to run a game at CypherCon, now is your chance to do so. I believe we have about 3 weeks left in signups, maybe 4, but yeah. You can see all the details about when it ends and how to sign up through that link right there. But without further ado, Dean, what are we doing here tonight?
Tonight, we're going to have two gentlemen who really need no introduction. I mean, we've got Sean K. Reynolds, otherwise aka Alpha Sean, who, hangs out here with us on a regular basis. And we have none other than, the legendary, illustrious, living legend Monte Cook. Here to talk about Electric Indigo, the new Invisible Sun Kickstarter that's got about 22 hours left, I believe. And 22 hours, $251,504 with over 1,700 backers. So, yeah, that's what we're here to talk about. Without further ado, guys, would you like to say hello to the audience out there?
Monte? All right, you want me to go first? Sean's scared. Hey, everybody. Really happy to be back here on Cypher Unlimited, and happy to be hanging out, maybe talking about some Invisible Sun or maybe other stuff. Anything you want to hear, we're happy to talk. Probably too much.
Certainly, I'm going to talk too much. Thanks for having me on the show again. Thanks for helping me wrangle Monte to chat on this one too.
First of all, a special thank you to Bear, because Bear was the one that said, "Let me wrangle Monte," and then Sean jumped on it. So they tag team Monte and forced him on.
Actually, if you want to be technically correct, Bear was talking about I think Bear and Sean were talking about being on, and I was like, hey, I haven't been on there in a long time. Don't those guys like me anymore?
We love you. We love you, Monte. Come anytime. Just say it. Say a word.
Monte, don't say that. The New Yorker and me will be hounding you, DMing you, sending emails every day. Hey, come on tomorrow. Sean, you tied Charles again, and we know for a fact that you'll be passing him in a couple of weeks.
That's right. So, we're doing a game.
Yeah, that's not going to make Charles too happy, so he's going to figure out a way to get back on the show.
And, I think I should get double credit because my games usually run 2 hours or more, and Charles just sits around for like 55 minutes. That's nothing.
And Monte, once again, thank you so much. This might be your 4th appearance, if I'm not mistaken. So you're catching up. You definitely passed Shauna and Bruce, or you might have tied Bruce, but you definitely passed Shauna.
Yeah, I think we had Bruce, because remember, Bruce ran us in the game. Bruce ran us in Pass of the Plane Breaker.
Guys, welcome back to the CU. Monte Cook Games has returned to the Actuality with his latest Backerkit project, Invisible Sun, Electric, and Indigo. It was fully funded and has already garnered over 1,700 backers, approximately 22 hours remaining. It is described as a re-envisioned presentation of the original Invisible Sun. Could you tell us more about this project, and why did you guys decide to revisit Invisible Sun?
Absolutely. Right. So right off the bat, I want to say this is not like a second edition Invisible Sun. The rules haven't changed. Nothing about the content has changed, only the presentation. And, here's the truth of it. Back a few years when we were putting together the Black Cube, it was really a labor of love of myself and Bear and Shauna, and we just pulled out all the stops, like nobody said no to me as I was coming up with ideas of things to do with the cube and the cube itself. But the flip side of that is that meant that the cube was pretty expensive, and even though we keep having to go back and reprint it, it keeps getting more expensive because that's the way the world works. And so from the very beginning, I have kind of wondered, is there a way to make a slightly more reasonable version of this game, like still beautiful, still all bells and whistles and whatnot, but kind of pared down a little bit? And that is what eventually turned into Invisible Sun Indigo. And so that's the thing that we're really excited about. We hope that this will be something that makes Invisible Sun more approachable to more gamers, right? Because it'll be a little bit more reasonable in price. Not going to break anybody's back when they have to carry it to their game session. Although it's still a hefty box, I got to tell you, because there's still 1,000 cards in there. So very excited about that. And then of course, we wanted to provide something for people who have the Black Cube and don't want a copy of Indigo. And that's why we created Electric Sun, which is actually the campaign that I am running as we speak in Invisible Sun. And Sean is a player in that. And I think it's going well. I think we're having a lot of fun. Yeah. And it's, of course, because it's Invisible Sun, it's surreal and weird. And the Electric Sun introduces a bunch of new stuff. And so I'm excited about that too.
We had, when Charles was on last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked
anything that guy says. Sorry, I'm in a silly mood tonight. I'm just going to say that right up front.
Go right ahead, Monte. We're here for all of it. But Charles also mentioned it was more about accessibility and getting it, getting Invisible Sun in the hands of as many gamers as you possibly can. But I just want to touch on this because I said this when he was on as well. The Black Cube is still a magnificent piece of luxury RPG that wasn't done prior, and it'll probably be a long time before it's done again. So that should be, hailed and appraised for such a beautiful product that it is. And I understand wanting to, have a pared down version of it, but there's still something to be said about finding all the secrets in the cube and, for lack of a better term, all the extra stuff you get from opening the cube. I think the cube is probably the most creative RPG I've ever seen in my life.
Well, thank you.
Hands down.
Never going to get tired of hearing praise about the Black Cube. It's probably the single thing that I am most proud of in my career. It's the game product that exactly the one that I wanted to make. I'm thrilled with it. And you can pry mine out of my cold dead hands.
And it was freaking genius to hide all those secrets in it because people were ripping up their cubes and they had to buy another one. That was the smartest idea ever. Our server alone had at least a year and a half of people showing pictures of how they ripped up their cube or ripped up in between pages.
It was kind of crazy. There was literally, like Anthony said, people just, somebody took the cube apart. They were looking for pieces in the paper of the cube. I was like, wow, that's crazy.
There's something to find if you do that. I mean, I'm not telling you to destroy your cube, but if you do, there's something to find.
Yeah, that got to happen.
Dean, before you ask your question, chat, I know you guys are already doing that, and chat's been trained well. If you have a question for Sean and Monte, we're going to ask as many as we can at the end of our questions. So just preface it with the word question, and Al's going to cut and paste it onto a different document. And if these guys are willing to stay and answer all your questions, we'll ask as many questions as we possibly can.
Yeah. So, Anthony told everybody out there, but I have a question, and I think this is a question that been on a lot of people's minds. What was your original inspiration, Monte, for Invisible Sun, and when did you know you needed an entirely different set of rules other than the Cypher system?
Well, so you kind of zeroed in on something that not everybody knows, which is it started out as a Cypher system product. That was where I was going with it at first. But it became pretty clear in the design process that I would have to change the rules so much for the Cypher system to make Invisible Sun work. And to get really down into the deets here, the thing that kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, was I wanted there to be a reason why you needed to have a mundane part of your action and a magical part of your action, so that when you use sortilege, and sorry if I'm using game terms that people who aren't players of the game don't know what I'm talking about, but when you use sortilege, there's a reason why you rolled a different dice or multiple different dice. And once I started doing that, Cypher system just didn't work anymore. And rolling multiple 20-siders is not something that I wanted to get into. And that was kind of the moment where I was just like, okay, it's got to be its own game. But the original inspiration, I don't know if there is just one. It's I love surreality. I love surreal art, and what I would look at surreal art and I would just say that's really cool, and I'm sure that is supposed to mean this is supposed to represent this and this is supposed to represent that in this surreal piece of art. But what if it was all just literally there, right? What if that piece of art was what you were that was the world you lived in, right? And there's like a giant guy and he's got a castle in his mouth and that, crazy, crazy stuff. And that's kind of where the setting, that's probably a big spark of the setting. But I'm sorry to go on, but you started the wind up toy going when you started asking about Invisible Sun. But the other big inspiration that I gotta mention is at the time it was really important to me to embrace the idea that it's hard to get a bunch of people together to play a role-playing game and get them all to sit around a table and gather in the same place. We've got busy schedules and life and everything, right? And so I wanted to create a product that once you manage to pull that off and get a bunch of people in the room, and now here in 2025, get a bunch of people in a Zoom room or whatever, Discord, you want something to kind of celebrate that. You want something special. And I made me think about I played a lot of those board games with have a million pieces in it, right? And all the what's the Cthulhu one is been around forever. But anyway, you know what I mean? It's got cards, it's got little figurines, right? All these different things. And I just thought, man, I want that, but I want it for a role-playing game. I want to have all the cool little bits and bobs and all the things. And that's kind of what Invisible Sun is. It's just me saying, isn't it goddamn cool to be playing a role-playing game with your friends?
Before you answer, guys, Anthony, so I'm going to throw the ball over here to Sean. So, Sean, I mean, you've been at the beginning, around since the inception of this.
Again?
Monty always just gush like that whenever you guys sit down to play Invisible Sun? Does he get happy like this?
I mean, it's not like he's gushing about the game, but we can tell that he's very excited about it. It's just, I think he has said that this, if he could pick one world that he's created that he would actually like to live in, it's this one.
All right. Sean, before I ask my question, act like Monty wasn't here, right? What was your initial reaction when Monty first pitched Invisible Sun to you?
La 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 la.
I mean, it was bizarre and surreal, and it was like a month after I started at MCG, and I was the community manager at the time, and so we were having the very first summit that I attended, and he just had a giant marker board, and he had all this crazy stuff. I still have a photograph of that marker board where he had his original drawings, or he recreated his original drawings of the Path of Suns and how they had kind of like changed in design iterations as he was working at how they wanted to go. And it wasn't even called Invisible Sun originally. So it's just like, what is this weird thing that Monte is doing? And this is really, really cool.
What name are you thinking about, Sean?
Blood Silver.
Blood Silver? You know, that was never actually going to be the name. We were working on it. We wanted to keep the project so secret that we made up a code name, Blood Silver. The secrets could be told now, right? But if you think about it, Blood Silver, how would you, quickly abbreviate Blood Silver? BS.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Nice. So, real quick, Monty and Sean, you guys should auction off a ticket to come to a MCG summit. I bet you guys could make a ton of money because, I'd figure a way to get, to usurp that ticket.
It'd be pretty easy just to have someone disguise himself as a tall, bald guy and just pretend to be me, just knock me on the head, throw me in the truck. And just never stop talking. And they'd be like, oh, Sean's really, normal this time.
Good thing your guys didn't go with Blood Silver, because that doesn't have the same ring to it.
No, not at all. Not at all.
No.
But it's in the game. Blood Silver is a currency in the game. So it's a full nod at that.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So Invisible Sun has a fairly extensive line of supplements already available. This project is adding the electric sun, like you guys mentioned earlier. What does this supplement bring into the system that your fans could look forward to?
You want to talk about that, Sean?
Sure. I mean, it's two sides. One is there is a narrative campaign arc that your player characters discover that there is a group of people who plan to be creating a new sun, which is absurd as saying, oh, the United States government is going to build a new moon, and that's where our secret base is going to be. And so, like, initially the characters are going to be like, that's ridiculous. And then you hit the point where, like, no, they're actually trying to do this, and this is not good. And then the other half is there's a new, I was going to say character type because I'm working on Cypher, but a new order, the Archist, which is sort of similar to a Maker in that they build things, but weird in a very different way. And Monty should be the one to talk about that.
So the Archist, I'm going to pull out a reference here, and none of you are probably old enough to remember. So in the Donald Duck comic books, there was a character that was like a friend of Donald or something. And he wasn't a duck. He was, I don't know what he was, but he was a bird of some kind. Anyway, his name was Gyro Gearloose. And he was an inventor, and he just invented all this weird stuff that, you looked at it and you're like, that shouldn't work, but it does because he's this crazy genius inventor. And the sort of the signature thing that he made was this tiny little guy who was just a set of metal arms and legs and a light bulb for a head. And that little guy would run around and help him and do things and everything. And that's the initial sort of impetus, the inspiration for the Archist. It's somebody who makes things that At first blush, if you're just coming out of shadow and you see the things that an artist makes, you're like, wow, that's some kind of weird machine. But it's not really a machine because it's impossible. It's magic, but it is surreal, weird, impossible devices, basically, is what artists make. And I think they'll be pretty fun for people to play.
Nice.
First off, I would have never thought an Invisible Sun conversation would somehow have a tie-in in the original Donald Duck cartoon. That's freaking
Comic
awesome.
books. The comic books.
And Chad is saying that there is actually the most recent DuckTales has a version of Gyro Gear loose on there that says you should check it out.
Cool. I'm not surprised by that. He's a good character.
So, we could talk about this all day, but can you discuss the new mechanics or story elements being added to the Invisible Sun with this project?
Well, obviously the new mechanics are the artist and what the artist can do, and so there'll be the artist will have its own set of cards. So Electric Sun will come with cards that have all kinds of weird stuff, and if you are going to introduce artist magic, there's a bunch of stuff that even members of other orders might want to have that allows them to interact with that. So there might be regular spells or even Vance spells, maybe. We're still in the early stages of some of the details here, but that allows them to interact with this weird type of creation that the artists make. And so that's kind of the mechanics, like the mechanical end. And Sean kind of talked a little bit about the story, and I don't think we want to talk too much more about the story, just because it's spoilery, right? But yeah, there's some people, and they're trying to create another sun in the Path of Suns.
So real quick, just out of curiosity, because of what you're saying about the artists and just what they are, would there be some maybe synergy or synergistic ideology between them and the makers?
I think either that will happen or there'll be a rivalry, right? And it'll probably depend on your player characters. If you've got an artist character and a maker character, it's kind of like, certainly when I'm running games of Invisible Sun, there's often a little bit of rivalry between the Vances and the Weavers because they look at magic so differently. And the artist and the maker will kind of be the same thing because they look at incorporating items and devices and whatnot into magic. They look at that completely differently, right? The maker is sort of, in many ways, I see the artist as being, the maker as being a very sort of traditional fantasy archetype, right? And making magical amulets and maybe potions and things like that. And the artist is just way out there creating weird things that can walk like a person, but also translate languages and can send a message across the Path of Suns to someone else. Like, it's just, and that's one of the cool things about artists and the way their magic works is that, unlike makers, an artist can take some device that he's made, and given him a little bit of time, he can do a bunch of stuff to it, and now it does something different, or now it does something additional.
That's kind of cool. I'm pretty excited about that because I loved makers. I love the makers in Invisible Sun. I normally gravitate to playing one, but now I'm kind of now I wonder how do with an artist. That sounds. I can't wait to get my hands on it.
And I'm playing a maker in this narrative, right? And there's just so many times where my character Whaley is just like, this doesn't make sense. Like, this is not maker magic. This does not work how I think it's supposed to work. Now, to be fair, I am like probably the worst maker player character out there. Like, I've deliberately made a character who's not good at being a maker, but he's still kind of like, no, you're wrong.
Nice.
How long has your adventure been going on? I know it's based off of your personal game, Monte. How long has the game that you're currently playing, how long has it been running? And
probably like 3 or 4 months. Not super long. I think everyone is like second degree or almost second degree, and it's mostly everything's so far taken place in Saturnine, as they're sort of finding out that there are these people with this weird kind of magic running around in Saturnine, and they want to just find out more about it and what they're up to and stuff like that.
So you haven't had a chance to kill any of the characters?
Nope.
No.
Yeah.
Not yet.
It'll probably be me, though, if it's me. If it's anybody, because I'm the one who dies.
Well, and you're also the one who throws yourself into combat.
That's true. Yeah, that's actually partly why I'm the worst maker, and that I'm focusing totally on like building up my physicality and stuff. And then when it comes to magic, I'm like, I got a spell that makes my axe better.
Yeah. We kind of talked about this a little bit with Charles, but Invisible Sun is getting much needed VTT support this time around. But with Invisible Sun always being has always been known as a visual masterpiece with its impressive props and overall design, making it a truly engaging experience for in-person play. How do you think Invisible Sun Online will change the gameplay, if any, and if so, how?
What do you think, Sean?
I mean, we do a great job of playing Invisible Sun without any of those tools. Like, you pull up images in whatever chat we're using, which I think is Google Meets or something like that, and we just roll our dice on the table and say what we want. But there are some people who like to have records of all that sort of stuff. They want to be able to see everybody's dice and modifiers and take care of a lot of the math for them. So for the people who love those sort of tools for assisting online play, I think finally having those from Invisible Sun will convince them that, okay, now it's time for me to step up. I can actually like run Invisible Sun narrative the way that I want to run it, with all these things to handle off that stuff, so I can focus on the story.
Honestly, one of the coolest things is the if you remember the early days of Invisible Sun, we created an app, and less said about that the better. But but the idea was behind it, and they were really cool. And so now we've put together something to work with all kinds of online play and VTT and whatnot that allows the GM to draw a sooth card. Everyone can see it, and then the GM can sees all the meanings behind it and everything. And so it's this very interactive sort of sooth deck. And my mind has gone blank of what that's called. Do you remember what that's called, Sean? It's got a cool name.
Oh, is it Thought Form or something like that?
Thought Form?
Yeah. But it's very cool. I'm excited to have that. And like, no matter how you're playing Invisible, even if you're playing in person, it would be kind of cool to just have a laptop or an iPad or something with that up on it. It would be really useful. I mean, the sooth cards themselves with the Path of Suns and everything is also really cool. But it as a reference, so you don't forget, like, well, what's the unwanted child mean again? That's just all right there.
Yeah, you don't have to memorize an additional 60 cards worth of divination material and things.
Did you guys also, like, with the alchemy, because alchemy is known for like the visuals and all of that, but did you guys like also do like a soundtrack, or have you like copy sanction any music yet or anything yet? for Invisible Sun.
Sounds like a great idea. No, but we don't have anything like that.
Invisible Sun came before the Darkest World, Darkest House, right? Was the concept of, hey, we're gonna do this, deluxe like board game RPG? Did you get the idea for the Darkest House, and later on the Darkest Woods because you did such a in-person game and say, hey, now I'm gonna do something for the online community?
No, he came up with the Darkest House because he's a jerk and wanted to punish our group.
Wait a minute, didn't Charles say that the Darkest House started in Invisible Sun? Your Invisible Sun game?
It started as a house in Saturnine, and as far as I'm concerned, it still is a house in Saturnine because it exists in a lot of different places. The way the Darkest House works, but yeah, that's where it started. Was a bunch of Invisible Sun characters exploring that, and mostly just trying to leave. I think most of the time was spent trying to figure out how to get out of there.
Yeah.
Now you want to run. Now I want to run Invisible Sun characters in the Darkest House now.
I want to point out I didn't want to go back. My character got out and was like, phew. And then everyone else was like, oh, well, there's more stuff in there. I'm like, let's not do that.
Sean, I'm right there with you. When I played Darkest House, my whole goal was to leave as soon as possible.
I mean, as part of the story, yes, it was wonderful. But for that character, he's like, I just want to go back to my house and read books. Why are we in this horrible, scary place?
Dean? Hey, Dean.
Sorry about that. No, the dog was trying to chew the cord, and we'd have been in trouble. So I was starting to ask this question before. You guys are like masters of props, add-ons. This project's no different. The Vizlay Companion spell card set. Can you tell us about it? Are there maybe a couple of spells that you're excited about? Something you would like to highlight? What are you excited to see come to life with?
Well, so the Vizlay Companion is kind of the new version of what we call the Vizlay Kit. And so it's mostly just a bunch of cool stuff that you're going to want for your Invisible Sun game. Character sheets and counters and various things that you're going to want to help manage your character. And I think that spell card set that you're referring to, it's not necessarily new spells. It's another set of all of the cards. Because certainly, as we've discovered in our games, having multiple copies of a card sometimes is really useful. I usually encourage people to not take the same spells, just because when you got that many spells to choose from, it's way more interesting if everyone knows different things. But sometimes it happens.
We have a couple of more hours left. Do you think there's going to be another stretch goal?
We've got some ideas, but I don't know. So that'd be cool.
Real quick, we're talking about spells. One of the things that I've always loved about Invisible Sun, it actually made me like Vancy and spell casting. How did you come up with that process for the Vances, Monte? I think that's because it's so different but really cool, and it makes it fun to play, Vancy and spell casting.
Well, obviously D&D has a Vancian spell system, and everyone calls it a Vancian spell system. But if you actually go back to the source material, if you actually go back to the stories written by Jack Vance, where people are casting spells, it's actually described very much like how they work in Invisible Sun, that there's just like these spells that they're sort of cramming in their head, and there's only enough room for a couple, and then you kind of get this idea. I mean, I don't know, it's probably somewhat me reading between the lines, but like there's this idea that the spells are in there and they're trying to get out. Like if you ever read The Color of Magic, Terry Pratchett early stuff, right? There was Rincewind the Wizard. And one of the reasons he was such a terrible wizard is because early on he got one really powerful spell like in his head, and it took up all the space, and he doesn't ever want to cast it, but the spell wants to be cast, right? And so there's hijinks and whatnot because it's Terry Pratchett about that. But I always kind of loved that idea of, you know, spells sitting there in your head, but they want to be cast, and you know, they're kind of taking on a life of their own, and you know, so I thought it would be really fun, like, you know, you can write about them in stories and whatever, like Vance did, but an RPG allows you to actually create game components, right? And so you can have this diagram that is like your brain, and it shows how many spells you can cram in there to prepare, and you know, you can start to kind of fiddle with them, and you're kind of making, it's almost like a puzzle, right? You're trying to fit as many as you can, but then there's abilities where you can fold one in half so that you can get more in there, and I don't know, I thought it was just a very hands-on interactive way to represent that concept that I've always loved.
Gotta tell you though, Monte, that's like really the coolest thing, because you bring up, like, you take, you know, somebody like us read so many books, because I get Piers Anthony, I get, you know, Jack Vance, I get Terry Pratchett, I get all of those feelings when you sit down to play an Invisible Sun game, you know.
Oh, good.
You know, even get those Rogers Zelazny feelings, you know.
Oh,
you know,
yeah, cool.
So it's like beautiful. So thank you for making such a great game.
Well, and thanks to all those guys who have inspired the stuff that I created. I you know, that is such an inspiration to me. Is I mean, you know, shows and movies and stuff too, but like the books that I read, particularly the books that I read when I was kind of in those formative years, I don't know, they're still kind of coming out.
Electric Indigo's already raised 240,000. Do you guys ever get amazed at the success that Monte Games has with crowdfunded projects? And why do you think your guys are so successful?
Every time we do a crowdfunding campaign, it kind of blows our minds. We never take that for granted.
I think it's also it's interesting from a designer's perspective and from a publishing perspective. I was at KublaCon a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about, hey, here's how to break into the game industry. But the other people on the panel with me were all in board games, and that's a very different dynamic. Like, if you are going to crowdfund a board game, like, when that project hits, they want to see that you have prototypes, and when that project is done, you know, when the crowdfunding period is done, they want you to be able to say, here, I'm going to send you out the playtest versions of the stuff because it's done. They're just waiting to produce it. And RPGs is just different in that, like, no, we know it's going to take us another X months to do this, and it's just a different time scale. It's a bizarre time to be living in. But I mean, we're very lucky that we have such talented people, and that everybody can trust that we can continue to make these high quality products that we've been making.
The other thing that I think a secret that not everybody understands is that, you know, I get the sort of crowdfunding that Sean's talking about, and I'm sure that you do have to do that for board games and have everything kind of all ready to go. And some people crowdfund their RPGs that way too. Like, we've completely designed this product. We're just, you know, as soon as, you know, the crowdfunding is over, we'll be done and we'll print it, and it's everything. And that's great. But I appreciate crowdfunding because it is a way for MCG to directly interact with the people who are in love with the idea that we're talking about. And you know, it's not that we're short on ideas ourselves, but like, in the chats and the comments and the interviews that we do, and on all the different avenues of communication, we listen, right? We pay attention. Oh, people really like this aspect. Oh, they really want more of that. and that all goes into notes. We take records of all of that stuff. It's all on our Slack channels and whatnot. And it's not like I said, it's not like we're short on ideas, but it's always interesting to learn what people are excited about. I mean, that is kind of true anytime you're pitching an idea. Like, I've never pitched a movie, but I'm imagining that if I went to Hollywood and was pitching a movie, what you would do is you'd kind of watch and listen to the people that you're pitching it to, and you see what things that you say are really kind of hitting home, really striking a chord, and then you focus on those things, right? Because I mean, it's just a matter of like knowing your audience, and I think that that's super useful. And I have worked in the game industry long enough that I remember the days when the only way, the pre-internet, the only way for a game designer like me to interact with the people actually using the products were the company that I worked for at the time, Iron Crown Enterprises. Sometimes if there was an extra page in the back, we would put a little questionnaire that was just like, what's your favorite thing about this product, or what do you want to see next, or whatever. And some guy would have to either tear that out of his book or make a photocopy or whatever and physically mail it to us, right, and give us that feedback. So we hardly got any, right? I mean, maybe a product would get like 2 or 3 people sending in this comment form or whatever. So I'm all about listening to what people have to say, and crowdfunding, probably more than anything, is just a way for us to just directly be in communication with the people who are actually going to use and are actually interested in the thing. I mean, you can go to, well, I mean, CU is an exception because it's such an awesome place, and everyone there is there because they're fans and players of MCG games and everything, and that's fantastic. And so we pay attention to all of that. But you go to some other place like Reddit or whatever, and it's like, okay, somebody's talking about the Cypher system or whatever, but it's like, yeah, but do you actually play? Do you actually want, like, do you like, you have no idea, right? It's a weird dynamic. But when you're talking to people who are backing your crowdfunding, it's you're talking to exactly the right people. That's what I'm trying to say, right? These are the people who are the most interested in your idea, most interested in your product, and they want it to be as good as it can be, right? They're incentivized because they're going to get it. So it's great. Anyway, I talked about way too much about that.
Hold on a second. Out of all the Backerkits you guys done since the original new Monero, right? What one project were you the most apprehensive about, thinking, hey, are people going to like this, or are people going to want to back, out of all the projects you've done?
For me, absolutely Numenera, 100%. Kickstarter was brand new, and I had done a little Kickstarter for a weird little side video project thing that I had done, but I'd never really done a game Kickstarter. I didn't know if people were going to care. It was just such early days, right? And it was just like, here's this crazy idea I have for a game. I don't know if you're going to be interested in it. And, my visions of it were going to be like this little book with black and white art and soft cover and whatnot. And, that Kickstarter blew up, and it became a big, giant hardcover with full color art and et cetera, et cetera. So that really surprised me. But boy, there was a lot of apprehension.
Can I tell you a secret, Monte, about Numenera?
Mm-hmm.
When you launched that Kickstarter, I'll never forget it. I was still in Arizona, and it came across, like you said, Kickstarter was new, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, what is this?" And I'm like, "Wait a minute, that's Monte Cook." And I went and I grabbed my original 3E Tollus book, 3rd edition Tollus, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's the same guy?" I'm like, "Yeah." And I said, "You see what he did here?" And that was like 10 years ago, so 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 I know a lot of people, a lot of my friends who were gaming at the time, we all jumped on it, and
Thank you.
you know,
I appreciate that vote of confidence. That means a lot
well,
to me.
but you do that, you know what? But I think that's why you guys are successful. We've talked about it 1,000 times. You guys always deliver. You always bring, you always bring it. Whatever you say you're gonna do, you do, and you do it with wonderful, with wonderful, everything, But saying that,
Dean,
you guys,
you didn't let Sean answer the question. How about
oh,
you, Sean?
I mean, I haven't been apprehensive about anything that is involving books that I'm going to work on, because the way we build these things is we have a kind of an internal pitch meeting and says, all right, what's our next crowdfunding going to be? And we pitch ideas. And for example, Knights of Dust and Neon, we're like, well, I want to do a cyberpunk book. And Bruce is like, I want to do a Weird West book. And Monte says, I got this crazy idea for Gunslinger Night Punk. And we were all immediately excited about that. And so we're just excited about the opportunity to work on the cool things that we want to make. And I think that excitement is contagious, and the people who buy our stuff know that we're going to put our heart into making those things awesome, so they're fun to play.
Yeah, that's really what it is, Yeah, I get excited every time you guys announce something.
The one thing I like about those group projects where it's, Sean is spearheading something, Monte or Sean is spearheading something, is you guys all have distinct voices. So you could feel like, oh, this is a Sean game, this is a Bruce game, because you guys, I mean, collectively it's MCG, right? But like if I see a sci-fi, I'm like, oh, this has Bruce written all over it. So we know, and us like nerd fans at MCG, we like know, okay, we know what to expect from Sean. I know what to expect from Bruce. I know what to expect from Monte.
Yeah,
Well,
and like I said,
and Dominique's the wild card, because
Sure.
we have.
I was just going to say that, like, it's interesting because my writing style and my speaking style are two very different things. Like, my writing style, I tend to be very concise, and I very much ramble when I talk. And Bruce is the opposite way. He's just very, like, precise in his speech and just has short little sentences. And then when he writes, he's just like, I mean, he's a novelist too, so that comes from that. It's just interesting dichotomy between how we are in person versus on the page.
And actually, that's a perfect lead-in for your question, Dean.
Exactly. I mean, you guys have so many great settings. I mean, in game systems. What are some of the challenges you guys face when you are designing for multiple systems or multiple settings at the same time?
It isn't even just settings, right? So I was the week prior to this last week. I realized that professionally, I was working on Cypher system product, and the Magnus Archives, which is slightly different. And the Darkest House. I was looking at the Darkest House. So those three different things, right? All with different settings, all with different game mechanics. And then that very weekend, I ran 2 different games on the same day, and neither of them were any of the games that I had been working on. So I, at one point, had 5 different game systems kind of bumping around in my head, and it was chaos. And I was making mistakes, and I was telling Sean to make a will save, and it was all wrong.
I just look at him quietly, and then like he'll figure out what he just said.
That's awesome. What about you, Sean? Do you have any issues or?
I mean, for me, it's less switching game systems and more that as a person who is about 80% designer, 20% developer, I often have to switch tasks and be like, oh, there's an adventure that's come in that I have to go and like drop whatever I'm doing and then think in terms of Magnus Archives instead of regular Cypher system. Or, oh, we've got a new Monero thing, and then suddenly some old gods monsters come through that Shauna wants some input on. So it's just the having to switch is this appropriate for this setting in this genre. Because, well, so far, I have not done. Electric Sun will be the first Invisible Sun book that I'll be writing. So all of my stuff for MCG has been some incarnation of Cypher System. So really, it's just the same parameters of math and game mechanics. But it's really about the setting and the story and that sort of thing that I have to go, okay, wait, they can't be. Someone in chat just said, if the moon is a monster, that's probably a Bruce book, which would be an appropriate thing for like a new Monero supplement. But if there's Old Gods of Appalachia adventure, that would not fly. So that's the sort of thing that my brain has to flip around.
Well, I'm gonna give people one little tease here because I am. You mentioned the Magnus Archives, and I'm also doing some development work. We have a big book of adventures that we crowdfunded a few months back. It's called Make Your Statement, and on my screen next to our chat here is an adventure by none other than the head archivist Jonathan Sims himself, and it is really cool. You're gonna love it.
Nice.
Speaking of Magnus Archives, first of all, that is a freaking awesome game, awesome setting, awesome show. How different was it designing for a pre-existing IP that has such rich lore, especially coming from your guys where you extensively, design all your lore and settings yourselves? Was that like a different mindset you had to take?
Absolutely. So one of the interesting things probably a lot of people don't know is that Johnny Sims, before he worked on the Magnus Archives, before he was doing podcasts and stuff, he did some game design. So he's an avid gamer, so he knows his way around an adventure. So that means that when I was starting working on the game, he was giving me direct feedback and ideas, and I'm gonna, when it comes to Magnus Archives, I'm gonna listen to him, right? Because he's the sort of the original OG, and if we had sat down to make the Magnus Archives on our own and it wasn't based on a podcast or whatever, it probably would be a very different product because I probably would have wanted to adhere to the existing Cypher system more closely because, that's what we do. But as soon as I got my hands on the Magnus Archives and listened to the podcast and saw how everything worked, I realized, okay, I'm going to have to make some changes here. And that was fun, A, challenging, B, and I'm happy with how it worked out. I like the stress system in Magnus Archives, and it's a much deadlier game than I've killed Sean multiple times in the Magnus Archives, it fit, I think, and I hope other people agree. We made a game that fit the podcast rather than the other way around, making a setting that fit the Cypher system.
Yeah, that's something I could say to you guys. Go ahead, Anthony. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it seems like a common theme of killing Sean off in Monte's games.
Oh, it is.
And the weird thing is, it's not because I roll low. Like, that's Bruce's thing. It's just I end up in circumstances where my character, oh, you're just dead now. Thanks.
No, I was just gonna say though, that's something that I've noticed though that you've done with the Cypher system in and of itself. You built this wonderful thing that is so flexible, that you can make those adjustments or those additions or whatever, and it never seems to take anything from the game. So. Yeah, good stuff, man.
Before I go into our last question, we have a ton of questions from the audience, so we're probably going to. I don't know if we can ask all these questions, but we'll probably take another 15, 20 minutes to ask these questions. But is there anything from the Backerkit that about the Invisible Sun Indigo project that we haven't mentioned yet that you want to highlight?
You think of something, Sean?
Well, this Sunday in our online game, you mentioned how much you're looking forward to the Path of Suns playmat because it'll fit better on your desk.
Oh, that's true. That's true. If you haven't heard about it or haven't seen images or anything, it's the Path of Suns is on a long, thin kind of. It's not on a square
Cool.
board. Yeah, and it's the same kind of material that we use for our playmats. If you're familiar with like the new Monero or the Strange
Rubberized
playmat.
stuff.
Yeah, and so it rolls up nicely, and because I'm playing online, space on my desk is kind of at a premium, and if I'm trying to lay out cards and got my notes or whatever, um, it it actually really aids in online play because it takes up less space on your desk.
Nice.
And for me, just having a smaller box, like I plan on using that I'm running a campaign right now. I'm running an Invisible Sun narrative. And about half the time we're playing at our friend's house, one of the other players' house. And wrangling all that stuff is a lot. But if I could just have a more compact version, that'll be my travel version of Black.
Nice. So, you want me to jump into these audience questions, Anthony? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Again.
Anthony looks frozen, so I think you should just go with it.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So, first question comes from Neto D20. It says, what does the electric sun represent as a fundamental concept for the actuality or for the mortal soul, and why electric as opposed to another color?
Well, the really short, non-spoilery answer to that is it doesn't. And that's the problem. It is, whereas the Path of Suns is this very natural thing, the currents of magic are flowing through it in all these particular ways. There's a bunch of dudes who are trying to make their own sun and plop it in the middle of it, and it's clearly an artificial creation, and that's causing problems. That's actually how the narrative that is included in the story that is included in the product. That's kind of how it starts off.
It's like somebody who's made a very beautiful Zen garden in their yard, and then some Yahoo just comes up in the middle of the night and throws a new boulder in there, and it's just like the whole vibe is off.
And the boulder's made out of plastic.
Yes,
Nice.
it's very tacky.
Okay. All right, so now our next question is from Jacques Barcia. He said, question for Monte. Each Vizlay order is inspired by a different magical practice, both from occult traditions and fantasy gaming traditions. What are some of the main inspirations for the artists, and what can you reveal about them?
So, I already mentioned the primary influence, which is of course Gyro Gearloose. But on a more serious note, so I have said earlier that surreal art was always a really big influence on everything in Invisible Sun, and as I'm sifting through images that I find online or I find in books or whatever, very often I would come upon something that looked like it was more mechanical, more of a machine, more of a device. And I would have to say, okay, well, that doesn't fit into Invisible Sun. Invisible Sun isn't about that. And at some point I just said, what if it was? Right. And so I started thinking about that. And of course, if you're going to put, and I even going to put this word in quotes, right? If you're going to put machines or technology in Invisible Sun, it needs to be surreal and weird. And the word that I keep coming to when I talk about the artists and the magic that they use is impossible, right? They make things that you look at them and you think about it from a point of view of science, which of course is a shadow concept anyway. You're like, that's impossible. That can't work. But it does. And that's what the artist does. So that's kind of where it comes from. There's less of a it's less literary, you know, in the way that, like, we were talking about Jack Vance and you know, the goetics come straight out of you know, Ars Goetica and all of that kind of thing, uh, and more visual. It's more artistic. It's very much inspired and informed by weird art with crazy machines.
It's Nikola Tesla on drugs.
It is. It's very. You know, there was a time when I was in the very early stages, and I was thinking about the Archist, and I thought to myself, you know, it'd be really cool to be able to call them Teslas, but in 2025, Teslas have taken on a completely
Another-
different vibe.
Yeah, unfortunately, right? Unfortunately.
Yeah, but as you know, I think it was Bear who was suggesting we should call them like Nicolas or something like that, right? Get back to the actual influence, but yes.
Real quick, so you guys, just so real quick, I don't mean to cut you off, Monty. Apparently, Anthony's internet was shut down there. They're having a heat wave down there in the city, and his internet was shut down. So he's in the chat. He's on his phone in the chat with us, and so me and Al are going to take us home.
Okay.
Nicholas Lake's question. He said the suit deck, while reportedly not actually magic, is one of the most amazing not magic elements of this game about magic. Any thoughts on adding more elements to the deck, such as new cards or new uses for the deck?
You know, someone suggested that in one of the like the messages and whatnot. Like, and I was just talking about how we pay attention to that. And so one of the crowdfunding comments is what the word I'm looking for, suggested something like that. And it's really interesting. And I will be 100% honest with you, before somebody told me about that comment, like yesterday, I think, I'd never even thought about it. It's possible. It's not, you know, we're one day away from the end of this campaign, so it's not going to make it into Indigo and Electric. But it's interesting to think about bringing in new Sooth cards and whatnot. You know, I will tell you right now that, like, there is something Sooth deck like that I've been working on the concepts for the Cypher system, actually.
Okay, that's awesome. All right, guys, listen, we have like 30 questions here. I'm definitely not going to ask you guys 30 questions. We're probably going to take maybe 2 or 3 more.
It's rapid fire.
Well, you know what? I'm going to let Sean talk, because I ramble on too much. So, Sean, you answer the next one.
I mean, I had a personal goal to see how little I could say in one of these chats, so you've helped.
All right.
You guys are funny. Cody from Zero question. He says, any chance of revisiting settings down the road in new books, like space settings of Stars of Fire?
Yeah, like we don't ever, put a bullet on those things. It's just a question of when do we have an appropriate time to write something for that and the interest to make it go live. So yeah, you never know.
Well, I will say that, so there's, we at the end of every crowdfunding campaign, we always announce what is going to be next. And so tomorrow, Electric and Indigo is coming to an end, and so there's going to be an announcement of what we're going to next. And I'm going to say that, like, it's a pretty good. I'm not specifically thinking about Stars Are Fire in this particular case, but it's an interesting point where we could maybe think about doing some revisiting of existing settings and whatnot.
Well, if the server is any indication, Gods of the Fall, Predation, and Unmasked could use some love. And I mean, especially like Predation, everybody talks about Predation out. And Gods of the Fall is your sleeper hit. I don't know if you guys know it, but Gods of the Fall, we all love it. I mean, as a matter of fact, that's the game that that's the first game I played with Anthony and Al. It was a Gods of the Fall game, So yeah, very special place in our hearts.
I love both of those too.
So
you won't you know,
Well, like I said, Al loves
very likely
predation.
gonna come back.
Al loves predation. Anthony is Gods of the Fall, and though there weren't enough foci in the book, I do love Unmasked. I love the setting. I love what it means. I love so all of that is great. Next question we're gonna ask is from Grundler. He says, when you play your Invisible Sun game, do you play with any homebrew rules, that time-honored tabletop tradition, or just raw? Or are you even at liberty to say?
I mean, there are things that we have like over the course of play, we kind of assumed were a rule, and then at some point, one of us looked it up and we're like, no, that's actually not how the rule goes, but we just liked it enough. Like, we generally let people spend an extra sorcery to increase like an incantations level by 1, but that's not an actual rule, so that's probably the closest one. And the fact that Invisible
The thing
Sun
is that it was a rule. That specific example in very early versions of the game, it was a rule, and then I took it out because I think because I was watching people burn through their sorcery too fast. But
that makes sense.
And yeah,
relevant Invisible Sun, you can take your recoveries out of order, and we just kind of fell into the habit of taking our Cypher system Numenera recoveries out of order, even though that's not the rule. So those are kind of like tangled up.
And I will I'll make this the last one because we're after 11 o'clock. Where is it? The graphic novelty wife question says, since Invisible Sun is so tactile and has so many physical pieces, can you give any insight into the process to adapt it to a VTT without losing the essence of the game?
I think that one of the cool things that we're wanting to do is use a lot of the same aspects of the game, but on a virtual platform, right? So, like, while when you're playing with a black cube and you've got your character sheet with the pool and the pool sheet and you've got the bene and whatnot, and you're moving those around, I think it's at least it's a goal that you kind of have that same sort of experience, even though you're moving stuff around on your sheet or clicking on things or whatever. But I hope we have so much amazing art, so many opportunities that we can just draw that in and make the VTT into still a very visual. I mean, we obviously, right, we can't make it tactile, right? That would be defying physics. But we can make it very so visual that you kind of feel you're still a part of the same game that came out of the black cube.
Nice.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, right? The best way to play Invisible Sun is in person at a table with all your friends and doing all of that stuff. But that's just not possible for everybody. So we want to accommodate everybody.
Nice. Sean, you got anything else you want to tell everybody before we get out of here for the evening? You got some tidbits that you can share?
Well, I can't really do spoilers because the boss is right here. But I did notice that in chat someone asked if like any thoughts on us doing another Numenera project, and obviously that is something that will come up. But they had mentioned like Glimmering Valley was the most recent one, but I know for certain we had a Numenera adventure in the 10 Years of Adventure book because I wrote it, so I know it's there. And at Gamehole Con last year, I ran a one-shot Numenera game called Machine Hearts That Hiss, and I ran it again at KublaCon, and I'm going to run it at Gen Con at Gamehole Con this year, and I have plans to run it for my patrons as well. But the one in the 10 Years of Adventure book, which is called Bake Me Another Body, was also one thing that I just made up for a convention, and then we needed a adventure to put in the book, and I said I'll just write up that one that if someone other than me could do it for my notes. So I'm sure eventually Machine Hearts at His will end up in some compilation of adventures, and we're going to go back to Numenera. We always go back to
God, yeah. I mean, we all love Numenera. I love Numenera. We're not abandoning that. I only say that because I saw some weird rumor or something online somewhere saying, oh, I guess they're done with Numenera. They're doing all this other stuff. And like, you know, we can only do so much at once, but that doesn't mean that we don't love the other stuff too, and we'll go back to it.
Well, we really appreciate you guys so much. I just want to say thank you for coming on the show before I run into this spiel about everything. People, if you have not backed this yet, there's about 21 hours left of Indigo and Electric, the Invisible Sun reprint, if you will, in a more compact, friendly, travel-friendly set. Please back it. You won't be disappointed. MCG always delivers. And so that's huge. Also, if you haven't signed up yet for CypherCon, which is in September, please do. We're still looking to get some GMs, and then the player sign up will be coming up shortly thereafter.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt Dean really quick and say I'm going to volunteer to be a GM for a game at CypherCon, so you should too, because you'll be cool.
Oh, awesome. Look at that, people. Now look at there. We have Sean K. Reynolds right there. The man just said it himself. He's going to sign up and be a GM. So that's awesome. Hey, you don't get that often. So,
and actually, that reminds me, we are having a Gleam raffle to promote Electric Sun and Indigo. And the details are on the MCG Blue Sky and other social media. But the prize for this is I'm running an Invisible Sun one shot for 5 people. And so you get it on the Gleam raffle, that could be your goal.
Awesome. So, and with that being said, if you like us and you like what we do, you can join our Discord. We have the largest fan-run Discord of all things Monte Cook Games, with games being run at all times. If you're not a fan of Discord, you can join our Facebook group. Although not as extensive, there are still plenty of great discussions to be had. Subscribe to us on YouTube. If you miss our Twitch show, these will always be free. We're also going to be soon streaming on the Anywhere Door, which is the new platform for Monte Cook Games on Moonbeam. Give us a little donation on Ko-fi, or you can stop by our merch store and buy some of the cool gear like I've got on. The CypherCon t-shirts will be coming up very soon. We have hats, notebooks, mugs, anything you could possibly want. So, yeah, do that. And last but not least, we love you guys.
Yep, thank you guys so much for coming on, Monte. Thank you, Sean. Dean, you did a great job closing it out after Anthony's little heat wave snafu. We got
slacker.
GMI after GMI this stream, but thank you, audience, for your patience in all those troubles. Again, like Dean said, the video will be up on YouTube if you didn't catch the whole thing. And yeah, thank you guys again so much, everyone in the audience. You two for coming on, Sean and Monte. And yeah, as usual, from us at the CU, we will see you later. Peace.